just waiting for Abe, but we can get started as he's on his way in. And if all the tech is set up, we're good to go. All right, y'all. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all so much for being here today. My name is Amanda Ghanem. It's my honor and privilege to represent Ibrahim Samra, whose passion and dedication to his work covering local community stories are nothing short of inspiring. Last week, we filed a federal lawsuit against CBS Broadcasting and its parent company, Paramount, over the wrongful and discriminatory termination of Mr. Samra for his position as a multimedia journalist. Mr. Samra is an award-winning Palestinian-American journalist from Chicago. He was recruited by CBS Detroit to move here to get their news station up and running. He quickly became a beloved local reporter covering a wide variety of stories that matter to our communities. As but one example of his inspirational work, Mr. Samra covered the Dearborn Department of Public Health's initiative to provide Narcan vending machines to residents, providing potentially life-saving information to hundreds if not thousands of people. We have here with us today some of our amazing community members, some people whose stories might never have been told had Mr. Samra not covered their stories, as well as community members whose stories now may never be told because CBS Detroit fired Mr. Samra before they could air. We have Samaya with us here today, who shines a brilliant light on the fight for accessibility in education. After Mr. Samra covered her quest to obtain her college degree, her community surprised her with a wheelchair-accessible van, allowing her to follow her dreams and pursue her education. That happened because of Ibrahim Samra. We have Joshua here, who dedicated his senior year of football at Fordson High School to his late brother. Ibrahim Samra's coverage helps Joshua's family keep their brother and their son's memory alive. But CBS fired Mr. Samra before his story on the one-year anniversary of his brother's passing could air. CBS suppressed these and other crucial community stories as the current war in Gaza unfolded. As I think everyone in this room knows, the government of Israel has escalated its siege of the Gaza Strip since the October 7th Hamas attack, and the United States has unconditionally provided weapons transfers and pretty much unlimited funding to the Israeli government in what experts are calling a textbook case of genocide, prompting massive anti-war demonstrations around our country. As of the dates of the filing of our lawsuit and of this press conference, over 32,000 Palestinians have been killed, with thousands more missing or grievously injured. And that includes at least 13,000 children. I don't even know what the number is at this point anymore. These aren't just numbers. These numbers hit home for us. In our beautifully diverse communities here in Metro Detroit, many of us have loved ones who are directly impacted by this ongoing war. And Mr. Samra's job was to cover those stories for CBS Detroit. But for the sole reason that Mr. Samra himself is Palestinian American, CBS Detroit would not let him do that job. They asked him if he supports Hamas, an offensive, inflammatory, and blatantly racist accusation. They rejected his pitches for stories about local community members affected by the war, calling his coverage biased and one-sided, even though it was literally his assigned job to cover those stories. Interestingly, CBS Detroit never called his other colleagues' stories one-sided or biased. Mr. Samra, as the only Palestinian, Arab, and Muslim reporter for the station, was the only one who received that pushback. All he wanted was to continue doing his job and tell our community's stories. But the hostility became so bad that Mr. Samra asked for an investigation into the disparities in coverage. Why was Mr. Samra being called biased for suggesting a story about a Livonia man who had become trapped in Gaza? Why was Mr. Samra suddenly not allowed to report on any stories arising out of Dearborn or Dearborn Heights? An employee of parent company Paramount investigated, agreed that the local station had missed opportunities for coverage, and assured Mr. Samra that management would be more transparent in its decisions as far as what stories to cover. But instead of addressing Mr. Samra's concerns, CBS fired him, ending his contract early without justification. We believe his termination was unlawful. It is extremely disturbing that Mr. Samra was fired less than 2 hours after reiterating his concerns that he was being singled out, discriminated against, and deprived of opportunities to cover stories because he was the only Arab Palestinian employee at CBS Detroit. But this case is about more than one person losing his job. It's about all of the stories that may now never be told. By firing Mr. Samra, CBS Detroit has deprived entire communities here in Metro Detroit of the opportunity to tell their stories. And we know what happens when people are not allowed to speak for themselves and when minority voices are pushed out of participation in public life. The silencing of marginalized voices is what allows dehumanization to flourish. That is why we have federal and state laws prohibiting discrimination and retaliation in private employment. That's why it was illegal for CBS Detroit to fire Mr. Samra for the sole reason that he is Arab, Palestinian, and Muslim, and that he raised concerns about discrimination at the station. We filed this lawsuit to say enough is enough. We cannot continue in the United States of America in 2024 to let our communities be silenced, especially here in Detroit, Metro Detroit, home to some of the most diverse communities in the country. This case is not just about the Arab American community, it's about our Black community, it's about our Hispanic community, it's about the Jewish community, it's about the LGBTQ community. And we are here today to stand up for all of these communities, not only for Ibrahim Samra, but for all of the people whose stories deserve to be told. Thank you all for coming, and a special thank you to our elected officials joining us today. I would now like to introduce my client, Ibrahim Samra, so he can tell his own story. Thank you.
I want to thank you guys all for coming. This has been an incredibly difficult time for me and my family. But one thing I know is that everyone standing in this room has a story to tell. And as a journalist, it was my job to share that story. You know, I've been thinking about what I want to say for weeks. Every second, every moment, whether I'm praying, whether I'm eating, whether I'm drinking, whether I'm sitting at home in my bed, every single second, this has been on my mind. And it didn't really hit me until I was at the mosque the other day. And a kid had found out that I had been let go by CBS, that they had fired me. And he came up to me and he said, "I'm so sorry you were fired." And I said, "Don't be sorry. We have a voice, and we are going to use it with or without them." And then he proceeded to say, "I'm from Gaza. I lost 300 family members over the last 5 months. These are the stories that need to be shared. And CBS, what they did was absolutely wrong. And I can tell you, if you look around in the room, every single one of you has a story to share. And we're going to share that story because at the end of the day, I am Palestinian. I'm from Ain Yabrud, Palestine. And that will never change, no matter where I go. I want to end by saying I want to thank my family who came all the way from Chicago overnight at 6:30 in the morning, had 3 hours of sleep. This journey just didn't stop. It just didn't start here at CBS Detroit. It started back in 2018 when I decided to become a journalist. People tried to change my name. They wanted to change who I was. They wanted me to pronounce it differently. No, it's Ibrahim Samra. I just want to end by saying this. Anyone who feels like they're feeling that they are being silenced, being censored, journalists out there deserve a voice. Whether they're Palestinian, whether they're black voices, white voices, everyone deserves a voice. And I will continue to share that voice right here in Dearborn and every single community that I walk through. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Dearborn Heights City Council Chairman Mo Beydoun.
Assalamu alaikum, bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. You know, coming in here today, I said, what am I going to say about Ibrahim Samra? And one thing that resonated with me when I first met Ibrahim Samra, it was the iftar dinner with the firefighters. And he called me and he said, Ibrahim Samra. I said, Ibrahim Samra? He said, no, it's Ibrahim. I said, oh, I'm so sorry. He said, I'm Palestine. He said, I'm from Palestine. I said, wow, that's great. And in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, who is this guy? Ibrahim Samra, he showed up, small tape recorder. I really said to myself, all right, I don't know what's going on. Are you sure this guy's from CBS News Detroit? He's not some like YouTuber. And he was Ibrahim Samra. He was the guy that walked into a room with a regular tape recorder, and he's going to showcase the greatest moments in any city on anything that he reports. And the thing that stood out with me was, aside from his name, it was his writing. It was how bold he was. It was how important that when he wrote about Dearborn or Dearborn Heights or Chicago or whatever story, or the child who wanted to honor his brother at a football game, whatever his story was, he did it with so much pride and dignity. And he did it with the name as Ibrahim Samra. That's who today CBS News Detroit lost. They lost Ibrahim Samra. There'll never be another Ibrahim Samra at CBS News Detroit. And really, for the media and the newsrooms out there, social media is taking over. You guys need people like Ibrahim Samra. Ibrahim Samra does not need people like CBS News Detroit or Fox 2 Detroit. We have a platform today. We have a platform of social media. We have a voice. We have a community. And Ibrahim Samra is at the top of this community. And let me tell you who's going to showcase our community. The man with the talent. And that's Ibrahim Samra. And let me tell you, we are not going to be silenced. CBS News Detroit, my message to you is, you guys lost. Not the community, not Ibrahim Samra. He may have been fired, but I promise you that this is nothing more or greater than an opportunity for what's to come for Ibrahim Samra. I will say, Ibrahim wanted me to talk about the great things that he showcased. The first time ever, two journalists stood out at CBS News Detroit during Arab American Heritage Month. He sat down with myself, State Representative Al-Abbas Farhat. There were some other Arab American people where he showcased the great initiatives that happen in Dearborn Heights, and surrounding communities. You know, Wayne County within itself. We talked about an organization of young women who started this organization to give out back food to the needy during Ramadan. Instead of throwing away your food, you reach out to this organization. Guess who spoke about that? Ibrahim Samra. We talked about the largest festival in the world, in the country, here in Dearborn. You had the Ramadan Suhoor Festival. You would never know about it until CBS News Detroit. Well, I mean, you know, they got a lot of attention, but CBS News Detroit was the one that brought them in during Arab American Heritage Month and talked about that. It was when the firefighters, 20 men and women who fasted in Shahr Ramadan, nobody really talked about that. It was Ibrahim Samra, proudly spoken about in front of CBS News Detroit. So one last time, Ibrahim, I promise you, this community stands with you. God bless you guys. Assalamu alaikum wa Ramadan Kareem.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to hear from some of the community members whose lives have been impacted by Mr. Samra's reporting. We're going to hear from Sumaya and Joshua. Would you like to go first? Okay, we're going to hear from Joshua.
First, I want to say good afternoon, everybody. And when I first met, I'm gonna say my brother. When I first met him, he was a great person, and he came to me and my family. Well, he came to me first, and we were getting ready for our a practice, and he came up to me. He said, man, he said, your story is so remarkable, and he was like, your story can change lives. And ever since the incident when my brother got killed on March 17th, state practice day, it was heartbreaking, and I didn't think I would be able to handle everything that went on, but I pushed through and I kept God first, and then I kept my family first, and I got through that rough time. Some days are harder than others, but when he came to me and he told me that my story was remarkable and that I had a story to tell and that the world wants to hear it, that stuck with me for the rest of that day. And he put out that camera and he got to recording me, and I feel like I was on top of the world. I feel like a celebrity, and he did it with love. He did it with passion, and he didn't care who I was. He didn't care what skin color I was. He cared about what can this story tell, what can this story do for others, and how can I represent you on a bigger platform. And when it came around and he told me that my story would be put on CBS News, I felt a great honor that that guy right there would be the one publishing it. But I got a phone call and he told me that he had got fired, and that at that moment it was just, I asked him, I said, what happened? And he told me the details about what happened. And some things in this world are unfair, but one thing that I told my brother was that when you have something going for you and nobody can stop what you're doing, and especially when you put God first and you put family first in front of your own needs, God's going to make a way. He'll move mountains in order to see your work put on a big platform. And that's exactly what is going on right now. Even though they fired him from the job, they didn't fire his work. They didn't fire him as a person. And when I met him, he was so attentive with his work. I sat down in that chair as he started recording me, and he was like, Josh, come on, man, you got to loosen up. So it took me a minute to get warmed up to him, but I can honestly say that guy right there, he's a true friend, he's a true brother, a true son, and CBS News didn't stop anything. Them firing him didn't hinder him at all, because his work will still be in his community. It will still be shared. People like myself, I know everybody in this room will continue to make sure that his name lives on with his work. And I want to thank you for taking your time out to share my brother's story, share what happened to him. And you're a great guy. You're a great guy.
This is spontaneous, but because CBS Detroit fired Mr. Samra before his story on the 1-year anniversary of Joshua's brother's passing could air, I'd like you all to join us right now in a moment of silence for Joshua's brother. Thank you, everybody. Next, we will hear from Sumaya and her interpreter. Yeah, why don't you just stand right here?
Okay, how do you want me to lower the mic for her? You want me to take them?
You can just take this.
Okay.
Hi everyone. Thank you coming for Brian Samra here. He is special. He so much. أنت خليت مستقبلي easy وخليتني أروح الرحلات والمولات يعني خليت my life easy. Thank you so much.
He's made her life a lot easier. He got her the van, and now she can go on the many trips that she's able to go to. She can go to the mall, and she can do fun activities.
عائلتهم محظوظين به بوجوده وأنا محظوظة لأننا قابلت هذا الشخص وهو مرح.
His family is lucky to have him, and I'm so lucky to have met him. He's very funny.
هو يستاهل كل الحب وكل الخير وهو صاحب الخير. هو يحب يعطي الناس الخير ويسهل حياتهم.
He deserves all the goodness, and he gives off so much goodness, and he deserves all the goodness.
Thank you so much.
That was her hum. عسل والله. Here. This. Where was this? Here.
Okay, thank you so much. Your story is so inspirational. We're so happy to have you here with us today. Finally, we have Michigan House of Representatives Majority Floor Leader Abraham Ayash.
Good afternoon. Sumaya was being quite generous when she says Ibrahim Samra is funny. His humor is quite dry. But I always say there are two good things that come out of Chicago: Barack Obama and everything that comes to Detroit. So Ibrahim clearly fits in the latter of that phrase. And as we talk about what CBS has done, I want to juxtapose it to what we just saw this past Sunday. I just flew back from Washington, D.C., and on my flight was Ronna Romney McDaniel, the former RNC chair, and one of the major networks in this country, MSNBC, hired her as a paid contributor. The numbers that we've heard is she's getting paid $300,000 a year to basically come back and tell us all the things that her and her leadership has done the opposite of and try to justify it in the name of, quote, saving democracy. And that hypocrisy is glaring because democracy is not self-executing. One of the core tenets of democracy is an independent, free, accessible press. And the only way you move towards an independent, free, accessible press is if you allow journalists to independently share stories that they hear across their communities. Sumaya is a clear example of that story. I want you to think about what it means to not be able to have access to the basic pleasures that we find in our day-to-day lives. Going to the mall, being able to just come out of your house and feel the sunshine on your skin. These were not things that Sumaya was able to do until Ibrahim took the initiative to share her story, to humanize her perspective and her lived experience, to then allow her to get the support that she needs. And you saw it through the joy in the way she spoke just a couple of minutes ago. That is not self-executing. That demands independent, passionate, community-based journalism that CBS decided to cut off in someone like Ibrahim Samra. Now, this is not ironic that he happens to be Palestinian. It is not ironic that he happened to be fired during a 170-day genocide that has killed and displaced millions of people in Gaza. It is that intentional erasure that this lawsuit, I hope, continues to expose. You cannot talk about protecting democracy when you are diminishing the same component that we know is a critical piece of that democracy. So, shame on CBS Detroit. And shame on any news entity that decides silencing someone you disagree with is somehow going to allow this country to preserve this democratic experiment. There is an opportunity right now for anyone in the city of Detroit, shameless plug, to hire Brahim Samra to share the stories. So I'm standing here today, one, to call out the hypocrisy. I'm not going to swear because I'm fasting. The BS that CBS decided to espouse on our community, but also to say that you have somebody in Ibrahim that is passionate, that is driven, that has a work ethic, that allows people to literally live their lives in the stories like Sumaya and in the stories like Joshua. So today I am going to say we all know what the BS and CBS stands for. But later today, thank you, Abbas, for laughing at my joke. Later today, I want everyone else that is hearing this story to say we are not going to tolerate this type of behavior from our news outlets, because if you are serious about sharing the stories and sharing the news includes people that maybe look like me and may not look like you. The news includes all the hopes and the horrors that are out there that we have to share. So if that means we share the story of an uncommitted, which is exactly what this is about, sharing the story of 100,000 Michiganders that turned out uncommitted and decided we were not going to stand for genocide, then that is a part of democracy. If it means that we share the stories of young black men who are passionate about sports, that is a part of democracy. If it's about people that are differently able, that is a part of democracy. And if you are going to silence people that share those stories, then you don't give a damn about democracy. You just care about your own BS. Thank you.
Very well said. Thank you so much. We will now take questions from the press if there are any about the lawsuit. And if there are not any, then I wrote a really, really good complaint, and I'm proud of myself. We do have one question. Yes? I'll actually answer this. It's okay.
Yeah.
The work environment at CBS News Detroit was very hostile to Mr. Samra. And another thing I would note, building off of what Representative Ash had to say, is that CBS Detroit actually has Mr. Samra bound to a non-compete agreement. So not only have they deprived, their own news station of, his voice and the voices of all of the people he was allowed to cover, he actually can't work in radio and broadcasting within a certain defined area for a period of many more months. So they've gone further than just to shut his voice down at CBS Detroit. They've silenced his voice from radio and broadcasting entirely, which is, I think worth noting that, these companies should not be allowed to impose these strict non-compete agreements on their employees, especially if they're going to violate their contracts and end them early. And as far as what the lawsuit seeks, the jury is going to decide what the result of this lawsuit is for Mr. Samra. Yes.
So, I don't know if there's a way around it, but you're more than welcome to use my platform to continue delivering your message and letting the community know about what's going on within our community. And I know that a lot of influencers within the community would also open up the doors for you, because you are very valuable to all of us in the community. And it was nice to see one of us standing in front of the camera and being able to, relate to your messages. And that was amazing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for all your work and all that you do. We have.
Can I say one more thing? And I also want to mention someone who is not here. My brother Ahmed actually couldn't make it. He's in Chicago. And I don't want to repeat your joke because I don't
Do we
think
have him
it's
on
tasteful.
FaceTime? We have Ahmed. Hey.
There he is. He's right there. But I just want to say I love you. Thank you so much. He sacrificed so much for me as the older brother. We shared the same birthday for 28 years, and hopefully many more. I love him. I love him to death, and there's people like that, that sacrifice for you. People like Sufyan, people like Sharifa, people like Jackie, I probably shouldn't have started naming names because, I'm just going to stop right there because I think I'm going to get myself in trouble. But every single one of you, I love you guys so much. Even my uncle came from Chicago and my aunt came from Chicago. Every single one of you in here, I really appreciate the support, and we will continue to fight, and we will continue to raise our voices. And this is not the end. This is not the end. They cannot silence me or any of us.
Okay, if we had no other questions, we do have one more. Yes.
The contract was ended early, how can they still enforce
That's a great question. We will ask a federal judge that question. Yes.
Ever since October 7th, have they been very hostile with you ever since that had happened?
Everything changed after October 7th.
Okay, so it's been discrimination upon you that whole time?
I'll let my Laura answer.
Yes, that's correct. The complaint that we filed in the Federal District Court for the Eastern District of Michigan this week details some of the offensive, discriminatory statements and questioning that Mr. Samra was subjected to by his supervisors at CBS Detroit. As I mentioned earlier, the most blatantly offensive of which was asking him if he supports Hamas solely because he is Palestinian. And that there is no room in any workplace in the United States for that kind of racism. Yes.
Were there any other colleagues or reporters that worked with you that also faced this kind of hostility among within the same topic or even other topics of their interest?
I think that's for them to decide whether they or not they want to speak on themselves. I don't want to speak on their behalf because everyone's experiences are different, and I'll leave it up to them if they want to speak out about their experiences. I can tell you what I've experienced, but I will say that there are people reaching out, and there are people that are wanting to tell their story but scared, and I'll leave it at that. But it is their story, and I encourage anyone who's going through it to speak up.
Okay, looks like that is it. Thank you all again so much for coming. Thank you again to our elected officials who made the time here today. And the fight continues.
Did you? You work there? I didn't know that.
You got a great little brother. We're really proud of him.
I owe you a call back. I will see.
It was, yeah.
I'm gonna edit you in the photo.
Good, how are you doing? I'm Russ. I think we've talked before.
They have. My response to you would have been ask CBS News to answer that question.
Thank you again.